So let me create a name variable called Halsey, like I did in the last video. I'm going to show you that name a string has lots of properties that lists have, because a string is a list of characters. So I could do len on that name. I could also access a certain element in that string, which is a list. So the elements are characters in this case. So the string data type is a lot like a list data type, but there's also a lot more. So if I did type on name, that'll tell me that it is indeed a string. And I can do dir stir. That would tell me all the string functions. So feel free to do help stir.capitalize to see how to use it. And whenever you see something like this, self is what comes before the dot. So if I did name.capitalize like that, name is the self. So whenever you're reading this help, just ignore the self, because that's what's going to come before the dot. The slash is sort of like anything else, so you can ignore that for now as well. And then let's see, if you did like help stir dot center, there's a width there, and then there's also a fill char. And remember, this is a default value. That's a default value. So that fill char is going to be by default a space, but you could override it to be something else. Let me kind of show you what that looks like. Center, and then so name is the self. Width, I want to say maybe 50. And then the fill char, in this case, it's going to be just a space. So here's a bunch of spaces. The width of the whole thing is 50. The whole thing is 50. And it takes that original string, what was inside name, puts that right in the center. Notice that all of these functions that change something about strings, they don't change the actual string. They sort of make a copy of it and then return that copy. So the original string is still intact. If I wanted to change the original string, I'd have to do name equals name dot, whatever I want to do here. Okay, so note that it returns a new value instead of changing the original value. So that's a little different. So let's go back. I want to talk about all of the functions that change the case in some way. Capitalize, you've already seen, capitalizes the first letter. Upper capitalizes all the letters. The equivalent is lower, which lowers all the numbers. But remember, this is not what was inside name before I did this. This was all lowercase Halsey, so all lowercase dot lower actually did nothing to it. Okay, name dot swap case is the same as name dot upper. Remember, I got the original there. So I could do instead capitalize dot swap case, and that's going to be kind of interesting. Okay, so this whole thing is the equivalent of this up here. So it takes that string and then swaps the case of that. So this daisy chaining of functions, these make for really good test questions. There's one more function that changes case. It's called title. So it looks like the same as capitalize, but if I did a string that had lots of words, weird life, we'll see, and then the book title, it would look like that. Remember, book is intact. The interesting thing about title case is that it takes even those very small words and makes them uppercase or capitalized for the first letter. So that might be an exercise for you later on in the course. So let me tell you about a different set of functions called, I call them check properties functions. So all of these functions check properties of the string. So if I did is alpha, it would tell me, yes, it is only alphabetic characters, only letters. If I did is digit, that is false. But if I had a string that was only digits, that would be true. Okay, notice how I put it. This is called a string literal. I put a literal string in there and not the name of a variable that contains a string. So that can be done as well. Name dot is title checks to see if it is title case, and it's not. Name dot is identifier checks to see if it is a valid identifier and function. Can I use the contents of this variable, the value of this variable, as an identifier, as the name of a function? Or excuse me, function or a variable, which is what I was trying to say. We'll see equals awesome. And that works. If I did book dot is identifier, that would be false because the contents of book has all these spaces. So if I tried to do a variable name with spaces in it, that would give me a syntax error. I could also do name dot starts with So I'm checking, does this thing start with an H? It does. And I could do ends with, does it end with a Y? It does. And if it ends with another character, if I'm checking to see if it ends with another character that it doesn't end with, it will give me false. One more thing before I go to my next category is I can multiply strings. That's weird. Other languages don't have that feature. So multiplying a string, yeah, I can do whatever I want with that. There are another set of functions called padding that I called padding. So I'm padding the string with lots of different characters. So these are kind of cool. If I did name.center 15, what it does is it takes my original value, Halsey, it creates a new string that is 15 characters long. Yep. And then it puts that original value, the original string, in the middle of it. It pads it on either side with just spaces. If I wanted to change that value like that, oh, that's the length again. There you go. I can pad it with another character. Notice how it only is it 5 over here and 4 over there. So it's kind of weird how it exactly centers it. So remember, this is still the original. I didn't change it. So let me actually change it by doing this. Now name has that value in it because I changed it. The other function that I want you to know is strip. So I could do left strip, right strip, which is R, or leave that character off and just do strip, and it'll strip both sides. So that's what it looks like when it's stripped from the left. It strips the left of white space. That strips the right of white space. Here's another interesting function called just, left just. So that justifies my original string in this new string that's 10 long. And the fill is the dash in this case. I could have left that off and had it fill with spaces. So let me do that thing dot right just 15. So now the whole thing is 50. I did not specify a fill character, so it did spaces. And then it took my original string, which was this, and then it right justified that. All right. And then if I did strip, here's a good question. What do you think will show up now? Will it just be Halsey, or will it be Halsey and the dashes? Halsey and the dashes. It strips the white space originally. And then, of course, I could do strip that of the dashes as well. There we go. Now we're back to the original. But, of course, I have the original there. The next set of functions is called splitting. I like to call them splitting functions. So let me do another string called message. My name is Bailey. If I did message.split, this is kind of interesting. It returns a list, and each item in the list is the word in that message, and I split by space. Of course, if I had another message, then I could do split by that character. Oh, there we go. So it does the same thing there. Pretty cool. If you're still confused about that, do this. And then self is what comes before the dot, so message in this case. Sep is the separator, and if you say none, then it will separate by the white space, I believe. That is the default value there. But if you override that default value with something like this, then it will separate by that character instead. Okay, so split is really, really cool. Partition is very similar as well. Let's see what's in message. I don't want, actually that's fine. If I do dot partition, and then I say what value I want to partition by, it could be a whole word or it could be something in particular, one character in particular. This actually returns a tuple. A tuple is just a list that can't be changed anymore. So the first item in this tuple is what's on the left of that partition, and then the partition itself, and then everything that's on the right of that partition. So that's a little bit more particular, but if there's something that you want to split the string by, maybe you want to only grab the top part of it or the end part of it, you can use partition there. And then the last function is really, really cool. It's called join. So join is nice if you have, actually, let me just show you help stir.join. So self is what comes before the dot. And then iterable, there are a few other iterables besides lists, but let's just look at lists. So join is kind of weird, but you say, if I said dot here in single quotes, so that's a string with a dot inside it, actual dot, join function with parentheses. Inside that function, I have this list of strings. Then what that returns is a string that takes all those items in the list and joins them with that join character. If I put nothing as the join character, takes a while to create. Then it will just join them. It'll just concatenate them all together.